Welcome to this webinar of the ICBHPE. It's entitled Global Perspectives on Faculty Development for Competency-Based Education. I'm Linda Snell, and with me today I have Doctors Yvonne Steinert, Melchor Mendiola, and Dujipa Samarasekera. Yvonne is a clinical psychologist and professor of family medicine and health sciences education and Richard and Sylvia Cruz Chair in Medical Education, and the former director of the Institute for Health Sciences Education in the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences at McGill University. She's also been Associate Dean of Faculty Development, obviously relevant to this webinar. Yvonne is actively involved at all levels of medical education, does education research, and the design and delivery of faculty development programs and activities. Melchor is a pediatrician, pediatric intensivist, and medical educator. He's professor of medical education at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, Faculty of Medicine, where he interacts with residents and clinical faculty. Currently, he is the coordinator of assessment, education innovation, and faculty development for the entire university of hundreds and thousands of students, and he deals with leaders and faculty in these domains. Dujipa is the head of the Center for Medical Education at the National University of Singapore and is the academic lead auditor for quality assurance, as well as for the exams for all medical and nursing undergrad, postgrad, and residency programs at NUS. He is also an adjunct professor for medical education at Griffith University in Australia. Now, let's dive into the webinar. Welcome to all of you. I'm absolutely delighted that you could be here today. So, the purpose of this webinar is that we will discuss how faculty development can support CBE implementation, talk about some barriers and enablers to engaging faculty, and consider variations in the global context, and review some best practices and tips to implementation of faculty development. So I think just before we start, I will say that I think all of our speakers today have been authors, and Yvonne is the editor of a book about faculty development. It is the second edition of the book. And Yvonne, I've forgotten the exact title. What is it?
Faculty Development in the Health Professions, a focus on research and practice. And I would say yourself, Dujipa, and Melchor are all very happily writers in the book.
Thank you. And Kelly, I think, is going to put a link to the book in the chat. Okay, so I think we'll start now. And one of the things that one of our colleagues, Dick Cruz, always says when we start talking about something is it's really better to define it if you can. He's always pulling out a dictionary. Well, maybe not a dictionary, but we can ask Yvonne if she can talk about her definition of faculty development to help frame the conversation.
Thank you very much, Linda, and welcome to everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here today. I think Linda is absolutely right that we need to know what we're talking about, and I would say that there are many terms used for faculty development, though faculty development is the most commonly used, and many definitions. But I thought I would share just a couple with you, starting with how we defined faculty development in our most recent textbook on faculty development, saying that faculty development refers to all activities health professionals pursue to improve their knowledge, their skills, and their behaviors as teachers and educators, as leaders and managers, and as researchers and scholars in both individual and group settings. And what I'd like to highlight in this part of the definition is that faculty development refers to all activities, be they formal or informal, be they individual or in group settings, and to the multiple roles of teachers and educators, including teaching, including research, and including leadership. The other part of the definition that we proposed in the book is that faculty development can serve as a useful instrument in the promotion of organizational change. And I hope that today we'll be able to talk about how you might be implementing faculty development in your setting with individuals, but also how you would target the organization at large and how you would address issues at the organizational level that can support teachers and learners. The only last definition I will share, because I know time is marching on, is a very old one by Centra, put forward in 1978, who said that faculty development refers to that broad range of activities institutions use to renew or to assist teachers in their roles. And I particularly like that definition for its emphasis on renewal. And I think that's the ultimate goal of faculty development, to help us sustain our vitality, our interest, and our passion in teaching and learning, in research and scholarship, and leadership and management. Over to you, Linda.
Thanks very much, Yvonne. And as I'm listening to those definitions, I'm trying to put them, and I can easily put them into what we're talking about today, which is competency-based education, where faculty who don't know anything about it are being renewed into it, and we're doing it in multiple formats, and we're doing it in multiple settings with multiple groups of people. There are principles of faculty development, and I would propose, and this is not a new proposition, that the principles apply whether you're talking about competency-based education or something else. Melchor, you've had experience with 380,000 students and their teachers. What would you say about the principles of faculty development that are important?
Well, thank you, Linda and the group. It's scary a little bit to be with such big leaguers in this session. Well, of course, my experience is biased. It has this Mexican Latino bias, but I would like to start by saying that if we're honest, faculty development often suffers from this hidden paradox. It asks faculty to radically change how they teach without first changing how they learn. And in an era of complexity, data abundance, and educational disruption, and when we have so much knowledge of the learning sciences, I guess we must stop seeing faculty development just as the transmission of tools and start seeing it as a cultivation of adaptive expertise. And regarding principles, there are several traditional principles. I will not repeat them. I will like to propose some more modern transversal principles. For example, the move from competence to adaptive expertise, that should be a huge principle now. FD should enable faculty not only to apply known strategies, what's known as routine expertise, but to invent new ones in response to novel challenges, which is a core tenet of the adaptive expertise framework. And CBE requires faculty to operate in what we call unknown unknowns, managing uncertainty and ambiguity, shifting big feedback loops, and individualized learning trajectories. Another principle that I think we should embrace is desirable difficulty. Faculty must be allowed and encouraged to struggle. Drawing from York's concept of desirable difficulties, well-designed faculty development should induce cognitive effort, metacognitive reflection, and error-based learning. This means abandoning overly scripted, overly safe workshops that avoid friction, because this is easier said than done in this era of extreme political correctness, full of platitudes and commonplaces. But we really need have faculty to struggle a bit. Another principle is that context is part of the curriculum. Situated learning theory reminds us that learning is inseparable from doing. So faculty development should be embedded, inserted in authentic clinical educational ecosystem, not just simulated abstractions. And work-based learning and communities of practice shouldn't be alternatives to formal programs. They should be part of the curriculum. Another principle, I guess, is supporting the cognitive load management, what we call offloading, because faculty working in CEB, faculty working in medical education or health professions education, have to juggle multiple cognitive and emotional demands. They have multiple hats, and FD can help reduce intrinsic load through schema construction and well-designed planning, manage extraneous load through workflow integration, and promote what we call strategic offloading through the use of checklists, peer coaching, rubrics, and yes, of course, carefully designed and used artificial intelligence tools. And I guess one of the recent principles that we should start using is generative AI as a faculty development catalyst. Because if used critically and reflectively, generative AI can become this eutagogical partner, enabling just-in-time learning, simulation of difficult feedback scenarios, and increase of reflection. And faculty, all of us have to learn not only to use artificial intelligence, but to evaluate it, to adapt it, and to guard against what's called this cognitive or epistemic laziness. I think that's all for now as a set of principles.
Wow. So thank you, Melchor. I love the way you sort of incorporated both education theory and some hot concepts of education into those principles. I've never heard them really laid out that way, but it makes a lot of sense. And I see that most people on this call are educators of some sort. So I think they would appreciate hearing all of that, how education theory is so important in this. One of the things you mentioned was context and how important context is. And I guess we have to think about aligning institution and institutional culture and context into faculty development. Dijipa, would you like to comment on that a little bit? And then I'm going to ask Melchor and Yvonne to comment on your comments.
Sure. Thanks, Linda. First and foremost, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. It's past 9:15 in the night here, but I'm really excited and sharing some of my thoughts. So basically, Yvonne's book, the chapter that myself, Adi Finyanti from Indonesia, and Veena from India, now from South Africa, and we were given the chapter about the culture and the context. And as Melchor very quite rightly pointed out, a culture plays a big part, the context, the situation, and the culture. And when we talk about culture, what we tend to say is that it's the organizational culture, the individual's perspective, the practice perspective, but also in a cultural melting pot. I'm from Singapore, so a place like Singapore, where we have a cultural melting pot, we have the local, the national, and the global levels to think of as well when we are training people and we are supporting people to develop. So here it's the importance of aligning with the institutional values, addressing hierarchy, and also promoting collectivism within the institution. Those are things that we try to bring in to our training. On top of that, also recognizing some personal biases as individual perspective, and then fostering that safe, inclusive space for the individual, for their learning, to share their thoughts, and then also to learn new things and incorporate that into their own learning, building that safe space. And then, of course, adapting behaviors to some of the local norms. Those are things that we really focus on. And how do we want to do that? And very often in my own experience, I find that focusing on a transformative journey, basically shifting from being culturally competent, which is a finite skill, to more developing their lifelong learning and building their reflective process. Develop what we call the cultural humility or cultural consciousness. That includes recognizing power dynamics and also some of the systemic inequalities and how they can play a part in that in their own journey as faculty members is quite important. So I think those are some core strategies and principles that we try to use in faculty development as per for context, the situation, and also using the culture.
Thank you very much, Dajipa. Just before I ask Melchior and Yvonne to comment on that, I'm going to ask all three of you after that to take what you said so far and link it to competency-based education. Knowing that Yvonne, when I said, hey, we're doing this webinar on this and the FacDev on CBE, she said, so what's the difference? It's FacDev sort of thing. I'd like to force you to actually talk about how it applies to CBE. But before that, Melchior and Yvonne, comments on Dajipa's comments on culture?
Thank you, Linda. Well, I found Dajipa remarks particularly resonant with me. In many middle-income countries, which Mexico is supposed to be like this high-level middle-income country, but like culture, it's like these Russian dolls where there are many subcultures inside the same generic culture. For example, all of you in Canada, United States, and all over the world, you have this stereotype of Mexicans. And we are so heterogeneous inside the country and inside each specialty, surgery, pediatrics, etc. So one of the things that faculty development faces a couple of paradoxes. One of these is that faculty are overwhelmed, yet under-supported, and they are expected to lead change without being included in the change process itself, which happens frequently in my country. And for CBME to succeed, I mean, institutional culture must see faculty not as barriers, but as catalysts. And I heard, as Yvonne mentioned, as you mentioned, I had to deal with all kinds of leaders, and it's depressing a little bit to see leaders not to care a lot about education beyond the discourse, the rhetoric. And it's very frequently heard that teachers are resistant to change. Faculty, of course, we are resistant to change. I mean, we are humans. So we shouldn't see faculty as barriers, but as a catalyst. And this means empowering them through context-sensitive faculty development that not only teaches how to implement CBME or CBE, but engages them in the why it matters for professional identity, patient care, and equity. And of course, there are many cultural, political, and infrastructural barriers to institutional change, underscoring the fact that FD needs to be part of strategic planning and not just of pedagogical training. Dujipa rightly emphasized the cultural institutional alignment necessary for effective FD, and in Latin America, many universities are still deeply rooted in traditional pedagogies. So faculty development must therefore act as a bridge, as Dujipa said, between innovation and tradition, helping educators reimagine their identities and practice within CBME while respecting local professional cultures, because we face what can be called innovation dissonance. I mean, there's a disconnect between imported CBME frameworks like the CANMEDs or the ACGME competencies from the US and traditional educational hierarchies that occur in our countries. So, I mean, it's not just an act of training, faculty development, but as a cultural translation, honoring at the same time local professional identities while building new capabilities for CBME. That's my comment.
So you've managed to put a whole bunch of stuff in there. Thanks very much. Yvonne.
I would agree with both what Dujipa has outlined for us and what Melchior has said. I think context and culture are key. What struck me is that we should broaden the notion of context and culture. We often think of culture as national differences, like Melchior said, comparing Mexico to Canada, for example, or the many cultures that we will find in Singapore. I think we need to move beyond national cultures or ethnic backgrounds and also think about the culture of our different professions. And within the professions, also the culture of different specialties. I know, for example, if I do a faculty development activity for a group of surgeons, or for a group of internists, the time of day will be different, how I would present cases will be different, and some of the expectations will differ. And then if I talk to a group of nurses, that might differ as well. So I think we need to think of the culture of professions and specialties. And whenever possible, I think there's merit in bringing people together and in focusing on what is unique to them individually. We also need to think of the culture of the organization, as both Dujipa and Melchor mentioned. Is it a hospital? Is it a university? Is it a specialty society? Is it a national society? And what are the norms, values, and beliefs that that particular culture or context upholds? And lastly, for this part of the conversation, I think we need to think of a culture. What is the culture of faculty development? And I'm continuously surprised how common it is across different countries and contexts. The desire to learn, the desire to excel, and the desire to invest in the next generation of health professionals really seem to be universal values. So I hope that everyone on the call can think of their own context, their own specialty, and think about what is unique and what is common to all of us as we move forward, really with our goal of implementing competency-based education.
Thanks very much, Yvonne. I see a paper in the culture of faculty development, if it's not already been written, by the way.
There is one.
Okay. Okay, maybe very briefly, we've had a lovely broad talk about faculty development, and I think I heard CBME mentioned once or twice. So a couple of sentences or a couple of minutes from each of our speakers on how what we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes applies to competency-based education. Melchor, you look like you're ready to start. So I'll start with you and then go Dujipa and Yvonne.
Okay. I should start with a caveat that in Mexico, we do not have the advantage that you have, like Canada and the United States, of having this national agreement of a competency-based education model. So in Mexico, we do not have a national competency-based education in the health professions. So every school, every university, every faculty has to approach it from a different set of values. In our university at UNAM, we have a set of competencies in the undergraduate level, but we haven't been able to agree on a set of formal competencies for the residency level. So I should say that from this perspective, we should probably see traditional faculty development, at least as it occurs in Mexico, as focus on how to lecture better, how to use technology, how to do better PowerPoint slides, and shift to the new roles, or the not so new, because competency-based education is not so young anymore. But for Mexico, at least, it's focused on the new roles of CBME, of being a coach, conducting programmatic assessment, giving formative feedback formally, and registering all this data in some kind of dashboard, helping learners construct the personalized learning paths. So the faculty themselves must undergo this parallel transformation. And if they do not use a CBME model, at least have this overview of what competency-based education is and try to adapt it to the role in the hospital. That's my initial thought.
Thank you. And as you said, even if they don't use competency-based education, things like learning how to coach are good things to learn in general. Dujipa.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Just starting off from what Melchor just now shared, I can start off with some examples on also what Yvonne mentioned at the very beginning about the different professions and how the competency-based education and also the context and the culture actually impact on that. So about 3 years ago, the National University of Singapore made a big change. They actually went in a big way to what we call interdisciplinary learning. And all our curricula based on competency-based curricula, all programs, not only the health professions, but all programs. So I was I was very fortunate at that time because just like Mahasho, I had the rare opportunity of heading the university level Center for Development and Teaching and Learning. And one of the things, the first things that the university did was to bring together two completely opposing faculties, Faculty of Science and Faculty of Social Arts and Social Sciences together. And they amalgamated these two and said that this is the College of Humanities and Sciences. So we brought together two different, completely, with their concepts and constructs and their ideologies together. And we said, okay, now it's time to kind of, for you folks to get together and develop common curricula, common courses, common modules, and develop the competencies for those modules. And now our ones who are getting a major have to do two majors or a minor and a major in the opposing things. And it was very interesting because the Center for Development of Teaching and Learning at NUS was tasked to train the faculty. And one of the things that we found was that we cannot come to an agreement on the competencies for our students who are taking a program in the traditional art stream and traditional science stream, when the faculty themselves are having completely two different philosophies and they come from two different cultures, right? As Yvonne mentioned from the profession. So the culture influences what is valued in education. And I think that, and the context is also really important. So when the two groups are put together and then it followed, right? So now last year, all medical, nursing, dental, pharmacy students, actually the courses were amalgamated. The first 2 years we learn together, all the students come together and we have to have common curricula for these students. So likewise, I think it took the interesting part was that building this within the faculty, the community. So initial efforts were to bring together for them to see each other, to be comfortable with each other, to share the common vision for their students. And then through that, we actually build the competencies. So that also affected the way that they look at how they approach the teaching learning approaches, the strategies that they will use when they're teaching in a common module. And also, how do they actually communicate? How do they communicate with each other? How do they communicate with the students? How do they give feedback to students? If you are from the science faculty and you're supposed to give feedback to a student who is following a major or a degree in social sciences and arts. So again, those attitudes and making sure that those are aligned to the area. So those were very interesting times, and I think that's why that the culture and the context is so important. And what Yvonne mentioned earlier, when we bring these different groups together and then trying to see the common vision, the common outcomes, and the common competencies that we want our students to achieve.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. I think we're hearing a lot about culture and context here, and culture and context as it applies to competency-based education. Yvonne, a couple of words on your view on this?
Sure. It's something I think about often, and you and I have had a number of conversations about it. My own belief is that the principles and philosophy of faculty development that underline faculty development more generally, or faculty development for competency-based education or competency-based education, medical education, are the same. I believe, however, that the content may need to differ. If you're working with new teachers, you may want to talk about what CBE is. Why does it matter? What are its key elements? Given that coaching is a really important aspect of CBE, it's important to talk about coaching. about formative feedback, as Melchior mentioned, about the outcome-based nature of competency-based education. So the content may differ. I also think it behooves us to use in faculty development the strategies that we want our teachers to use. So if we want our teachers to be working with residents in the workplace and promote work-based learning and workplace-based assessment, we should also conduct faculty development in the workplace. If we believe that our teachers should be coaching and mentoring our students, rather than having a more formal teacher role, we should be coaching or using peer coaching as a strategy in faculty development. So I think, and if we believe, for example, that communities of practice are important for our learners, we should use those to nurture and support our teachers. So I think role modeling and using the same strategies with faculty as we use with students and learners at all levels would be very worthwhile. And the last thing I would say, given that in some places competency-based education is new and in some it's no longer new, there's a clear role for leadership in this area. And I would make an additional plea that beyond teaching, learning, and assessment, we also focus on faculty development for leadership in this area in particular, as well as leadership more generally. So I see comments coming in. I haven't read one, but I'd love to hear from our audience this morning.
Thanks very much, Yvonne, and thanks for addressing some of the important formats or approaches, particularly for CBE. I see a number of questions, and I'm going to just select a couple to start off with. Ola, welcome. Ola says, for CBME, it should be logical to focus on FacDev on Van Mel's core components. And one of the overarching features is the individualized education with the purpose to bring everyone whatever they need to the standards that are expected. So here's the question: how can faculty development be targeted at individual learner needs, maybe even rather than culturally focused? What would this mean for the techniques of faculty development in practice? So here we have individual learner needs, learners being the teacher, and individual learner leads where learners being the learners, the med students or the residents. So it could be either, I guess. So would anyone, we don't have to have everyone answer all of them, but would anyone like to take a crack at that one, Yvonne?
So unfortunately, and maybe Ola, you can, hi, and maybe you can write a comment. I wasn't sure what you meant by individual learner needs, but a couple of thoughts that come to mind. Because if we're talking about competency-based education, one of the questions might also be, what are the competencies we expect of our teachers? And I know that there are a number of competency frameworks for teachers in different contexts and in different environments, but I would question how many of us actually use those. And perhaps one way to individualize faculty development based on faculty individual needs is to look at a competency framework, help people self-assess and think about what are their strengths and areas for improvement, and use a competency framework to guide their faculty development. The other thing that this highlights for me is that we usually think of faculty development as a formal, structured group activity. And collectively as a community, we need to begin to value and prove credible individual growth and learning. So that if I, for example, learn as I'm working, reflect on my experience, and then discuss it with a colleague like Linda, how can I make that count as faculty development? I think if I went to a workshop on learner needs, it would count immediately. But having an individual discussion might not count in the same way. And
Okay,
Ola's question relates to the individual needs of the residents, I think that would be something that could be well discussed through peer coaching or through a workshop with faculty members.
Thanks, Yvonne. I think Melchior, you had a comment?
And I think Ole was trying to say something too about his.
Sorry. So
so my comment was not so much about individual faculty needs, but rather I would translate that to CBME, which is actually focusing on thinking of tailored needs of individual students. So you have to juggle with different learners if you are a clinician. So how do you actually create, what type of faculty development would be suitable actually to get that into the minds of clinicians, that they focus on individual differences of learners?
Thank you, Ole, for that. So I think you clarified that it's the individual learner and not the individual teacher. Melchor or Dujipa, any comments on that?
Probably, yeah. I'll share some of my thoughts. So, I mean, as Ola mentioned, his area of entrustable professional activity, where you focus on the individual student. Now, if we look at the competency of a certain competence, let's say breaking bad news, right? But when you're teaching, now we are teaching in interdisciplinary, interprofessional way, right? No longer medical school or nursing school, you have faculty which are completely nursing or completely medical. But however, if you are going to train them as faculty, they need to understand, right? Because they come from different cultural context. I mean, the professional cultural context, right? Their understanding of this breaking bad news, even though it is as a competency, as an entrustable professional activity, they may understand it from different view. I mean, we think of a medical student with breaking bad news and to be entrusted with that. The trainer may be from nursing, or that's what's happening now, even at NUS, or it may be a dental surgeon, or it may be a physician. So for that particular group, at least at the individual foundation level, not at the full entrustability, but at least to bring that foundational communication skill set to the student, we need to we need to help our faculty to understand that from their different professional perspectives, what is really needed. And that's where I think what I mentioned earlier, bringing them with that training, that transformative learning, and then having multiple modalities, as Yvonne shared. So it usually happens very informally when the person talks with another person from a different profession, and then getting to know how to kind of do that in a proper way, and how they understand that particular competency in that particular context. So I probably, yeah.
Melchor, earlier on, you talked about adaptive expertise as one of your principles, and it seems to me that might actually link to this question about teaching faculty to deal with learners when learners are at different levels or are different. Would you like to expand on that? And then Yvonne, I saw your hand.
Okay, yes, I think that, I mean, we have these challenges. For example, in a couple of months, some of us will be in Barcelona for the AMI meeting, and we had some workshops accepted, and we designed the workshops for a general group. We do not know who will be in the workshop. We do not know their individual needs and their individual requirements. So I guess there's this tension between having these transversal generic competencies and how to design things to actually have an impact on the individuals. And I guess adaptive expertise is one of the major conceptual contributions lately in this field. I would also add that we can use, and that's a dream at least for us in Mexico, but I think there's some push for it in the medical education literature, the use of learning analytics and the use of medical precision education to actually track the individuals and meet them where they are, and to have this qualitative and quantitative information about how they are advancing. It varies a lot, of course, depending on the assessment system that you have in place. If you have these vague, non-specific quantitative, educational instruments or tools that do not go back to the resident or to the medical student, it's very difficult to actually have this individual, the dream, the holy grail of medical education, which is to follow individuals during their track and helping them, supporting them when they need it. That's my thought.
Thank you. I'll encourage people to put questions in the chat. And Yvonne, you wanted to add some comments to what's been said?
Well, as always, Linda, you said prior to introducing Melchior again, why I put my hand up, which was that I think exploring what an individual needs from the faculty perspective is very tightly linked to adaptive expertise. And that if we're able to move beyond routine expertise to adaptive expertise that includes innovation in novel situations, that in itself will help us be better prepared. I also think the topic is really one that is worthwhile for a faculty development activity and for a workshop or seminar in particular. And to build on the notion of adaptive expertise, moving it out of the classroom to the simulation center, where you have different standardized learners, for example, or different standardized residents with different needs, is a wonderful catalyst for talking to faculty members about how we can be sensitive to what our learners present to us. That was my only comment.
Thank you. And I see that someone's put in the chat an article by somebody called Yvonne Steinert and others about adaptive expertise in faculty development. Reminder to put your questions in. And I do see a question early on. It's a little bit of a change of focus here. But we know that many faculty have said that competency-based education for them means more work, less time, can't be as efficient, etc. And Adele has asked the questions, how can we engage faculty in faculty development up front without lapsing into inefficiency and getting the work done? How do we also engage faculty who might like to teach, but they're not all that interested in the gory details of medical education? Would one of you like to try that?
Linda, can I frame the first part of the question a little bit?
Absolutely.
So as you were speaking, all of you were speaking, I was thinking about, the big implementation of CBME in many of our jurisdictions and how we need to get the work done, but we also need the faculty to be engaged when it's time for them to help us implement it. They probably don't want to be part of the creation, but they don't like it when we come to them with something already created and say, now we'd like you to do this thing. So how do we find the sweet spot so that they are engaged, but don't have to be part of the beginning, and we can be efficient and get the work done, and then engage them in a way that's meaningful to them so they feel part of it and they don't feel like it's a top-down, we're making you do this. I think that's what I certainly struggle with in our department when I have to make any changes.
Thank you. And I do see that the last few questions relate to resources being pulled in many directions, etc. So would anyone like to address the question of fac dev in a resource-poor, work-rich, meaning clinical work-rich, usually, environment?
Well, maybe. Oh, go ahead.
It's all right.
Okay, so we have this happens all the time in Zoom meetings. We step on each other digital toes. So we have this paradox of participation. I mean, we want faculty buy-in, to get invested, but we often design the change first and then invite them to ratify it later. And we were talking yesterday in my group about the challenge of having leaders design things that they do not have to do, that they're not accountable for. So the people in the trenches are the ones that are accountable for the implementation piece. So the result is, of course, predictable resistance, not just because faculty are averse to change, but because they were positioned as implementers rather than co-constructors. And it's very difficult to find this sweet spot, but probably one strategy would be not to overwhelm them with educational theory like I did at the beginning, but by starting from their lived teaching experiences and have this co-interpretation of lived experiences and develop this cultural narrative to have a more social capital to actually become part of the process. And maybe one step can be to use principles of design thinking. I am sure most of you have heard about it. And you have to think of the people that have to cross the bridge before building the bridge. And the design thinking is beautiful in that regard. And because at the end of the day, faculty, I mean, you have to engage faculty through meaning, not mandates, not orders. And they do not want to debate the philosophy. Every time that I use the word epistemology, because I deal now with all kinds of people in my university, we have this epistemological violence. I mean, nobody wants to change their paradigm. So it's not easy. I mean, that's one of that's my message now. Thank you.
Thank you. So as Yvonne mentioned earlier, faculty development is an agent of change. And I think here we're talking about as an agent of change for CBE, but also the agent of change for getting faculty development, as you said, for people to consider it part of their life as opposed to something added to their life. Dujipa, you had a couple of short comments.
Sure, very short. We need to understand we are all human beings. So whatever the faculty development, it must make one's life easier, better, and faster and efficient. So if you're a good faculty developer, we need to craft the changes, the CBME and also the faculty development alongside with that as a good value proposition to the individual faculty and also to the collective. And if we can do that, then it works. Going with all guns blazing and with top-down approach and worse still, bringing someone from outside as a real expert, that's disaster and failure, a recipe for failure. And I have seen that happening. And even though you see a very quick, short results, it really is not sustainable. And that's something that we need to really think and plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Dujipa. My experience with bringing in what we call, visiting firemen, someone who comes from far away with slides is the definition, is that often what works well is pairing that person with a local person who does understand culture and context so that whatever's happened, whatever they talk about is actually relevant. I see we have time for one more question. Yvonne, short.
Maybe a short response. I think the answer in part to the question of meaningful engagement relates to Ola's original question about learner needs, which I interpreted originally as faculty needs. I believe strongly that we need to go to our faculty. We need to start with meaningful conversations about what their experiences are, as Melchor said. We need to see what their curiosity is about and where do they feel they need help to move the system forward. And while doing that, we need to think of Roger's theory, I believe, of diffusion of innovations. We always hope that everybody will come on board and will be as enthusiastic we are. There are early adopters and there will always be laggards. And so I think we need to be aware that we'll never get everyone on board, but we can do a lot to get many people on board. And lastly, I'd say we also need to give people what they are looking for, what they need and what they want. Melchor talked about AI. That's one of the biggest issues for our faculty at the moment. How can they use AI? How can they make sure AI doesn't take over their lives and that of their students and their patients? And so if we do activities that our faculty want, we also can use that as a hook to get them more meaningfully engaged in what we feel needs to be done for the culture at large.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more question, but I'm going to ask only one of you to answer. And it relates, Bob Englander asked it, to what extent should the core components of competency-based education be a framework for faculty development? And just to frame it for you three, core components, Van Mel's 5 core components, are used fairly widely by scholars in CBE at the moment. And it can frame what we do for learners and for curriculum design, but the question is, can it also frame what we do for faculty? Goals, having clear competency goals, methods, a way of assessing, a way of logically sequencing, for instance. Would one of you put up your hand if you'd like to tackle that one? Lots of enthusiasm there. Do I have to volunteer one of you? Melchor.
Well, I mean, it's thanks for the question. As usually, one says when one doesn't know what to say. But I mean, the CBME or CBE framework is a fascinating one. But we need to have this, and I know that the word epistemological is overused, but this epistemological shift that CBME represents, that epistemological shift hasn't occurred in my country. So I find it hard to focus on the specifics to answer the question. But I think that if the faculty development aligned to CBME, I mean, needs to be longitudinal, just in time, embedded learning, focus on role shaping, identity, and modular, competency-driven pathways, and feedback, reaching feedback. Well, that's my quick answer.
Thank you. We are nearing the end here, and what I'd like to do is ask each of our panelists in 90 seconds, and I'm going to time you this time, to maybe give us some last thoughts, a lesson, some advice, some wisdom, a tip, something like that. And I'm going to go Dujipa Ivan Melchor. Dujipa. You're on mute.
Sorry, yes. So let me start by sharing that faculty development is not one size fits all. And we need to take into account the context in which it is being done and the multiple different ways we should engage our faculty for them to be developed and to see the growth. And in this, we need to craft, as I mentioned earlier, what is the real value proposition for them. And finally, I think when we talk about culture, we need to move from being just culturally competent to being culturally consciousness and culturally be aware. And that brings not only as mentioned earlier, not the national or the ethnic groups, but also the professional cultures. The challenges are many, but I think the faculty developers should prioritize one's own humility, inclusion, and adaptability as part of their growth strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think when you talk about culture, we can talk also about the CBME culture. Who did I say was next? Yvonne.
I think it's terrific that so many people have joined our call and that there's a shared collective interest in faculty development. I'm a firm believer that for the implementation of CBE to be successful, faculty development is a core component. But like Dujipa said, it's not one size fits all, and it really should be tailored to the needs and interests of your setting, of your group, of your learners. I think to be successful, a few things to think about is to find a core group to help you. Make sure your group includes faculty members, includes residents, other health professionals or specialists if possible, and naysayers. Don't have a group of everyone who believes in what you're doing, but I always feel if we have naysayers on our core group and we can convince them of what we're doing, then we have much greater chance of success. I would also say aim for early success, or as colleagues often say here, aim for low-hanging fruit. Try a faculty development activity or approach, be it coaching or a workshop, or even individual conversations that you know will have success and that will be a hook to further faculty development. And lastly, I think it's critical that all of you who are interested in pursuing this further be passionate about what you're doing, and we're passionate about working with faculty who I believe all want to grow, develop, and excel.
Thank you, Yvonne. Wow. 89 seconds and 0.28. That was well done. Not sure.
Okay, so I guess that faculty development is not just a tool or a toolbox, but a lever for change, as has been mentioned. And it has to be collaborative, longitudinal, and contextually anchored. If we ask faculty to change their teaching, their assessment, and their mindsets, we must then offer more than workshops, on-off workshops. We must build cultures of support, curiosity, and shared purpose, because we tend to compartmentalize things a lot. I mean, we talk about assessment and conceptual frameworks and implementation science, etc. But at the end of the day, reality is a combination of messy things, humans being what they are, etc., etc. So I guess that faculty development is like the connective tissue, can be the connective tissue of CBME, because without it, curricular reforms remains in the abstract. So, I mean, longitudinal, supported, contextualized. And as faculty developers, we are not only trainers, but I guess we are like these curators of transformation. And we must ensure that programs are grounded in real context, supported by leadership, not just by lip service, but actual support, and evaluated for their impact.
Thank you very much, Melchor. Wow. The connective tissue. I like that. So just a brief summary of what I think we've heard. The number of education theories and concepts, not only education theories, but other concepts in this webinar has been huge. And what I really liked has been the mix and the link between those theories and concepts and practice at the individual level, and practice as it affects the systems level. So I'd like to thank our three panelists who have done a wonderful job of giving us a way of thinking about faculty development and a way of thinking about it, particularly as it applies to competency-based education. I will remind you, there's a link again to the book in the chat, and there's also a number of references in the chat that you might find useful. We are taking a break from the webinars over seminars or over summer in the Northern Hemisphere anyway, and we'll be back in the fall or the spring in the Southern Hemisphere in September with more topics related to the implementation of competency-based education. Thank you to our co-directors, Adele and Kelly, and thank you all for attending this. I saw there were about 45 people on at a maximum. So have a good break, and we'll see you all in September, as the song goes. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you all.
Thank you very much. My router held on, so I'm so happy.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.